When it comes to refactoring, the journey is often a long and continuous one. That's why today we'll be taking a look again at Peek-a-Vue and seeing how we can improve the codebase. Hey, what's up everyone? My name is Ben Hong and I'm a Vue.js core team member. And today, we're here to accomplish one thing and one thing only. And that is to refactor our app.vue file into its respective components so that it's easier to iterate on in the future. So when it comes to refactoring our app into components, the HTML and CSS is honestly one of my favorite places to start because a lot of times when it comes to the logic and the JavaScript basically, you have a lot of places where things can basically go wrong. So when we take a look at our app here, we see that there's a lot going on here in terms of this sort of top piece, right? We have a lot of basically static HTML and a couple things that could honestly probably be refactored in the future. So for now, I think what we're gonna do is let's start by pulling this piece out into its own component. So going into our sidebar, I'm gonna go ahead and open a new file, or create a new file. I'm gonna call it apphero.vue. And so you see that, so going forward, I'm gonna try to implement some of my naming conventions that I really recommend when building Vue apps, which is to really stay away from that's the component on the brain. Staying away from one-word components, just because in the future, in the event there are any sort of HTML specs where they use that word, you basically avoid those sort of conflicts. So, in the future, a refactor might be renaming this. But anyhow, so getting us started, let's go ahead and split this up. So we have our app.hero and here. So I'm going to go ahead and scaffold out my template, and let's just take this whole section here that we have that includes our hero. So if I cut this and save, we should see everything on the top disappear, which is great. That's what we want. So we go ahead and paste that here. And then let's go ahead, and there's no logic to this right now, so we can just actually get rid of the JavaScript block. And so what we really want is that when we drop the app.hero here, we want everything to appear again as anticipated or as expected. So here, import app.hero from components/app.hero. And then let's go ahead and register that with our app. So we save, you'll see that, okay, what's going on? It's having trouble locating it. I spelled it wrong, it should be components. Here we go. Okay, so it's appearing, which is good. So let's go ahead and migrate some of those styles over right now. Since we have here, we have a bunch of stuff here from like the power. So you'll notice that here I have like power link, power logo, power wrapper. So looking at the CSS here, you'll see this is one of the reasons I like to prefix my CSS classes when they're related. That way it's a lot easier to find out what's happening here. And so you can see here, powered wrapper here keeps everything basically encapsulated with itself. So we have all these sort of powered things. So if I go down into the powered section, you'll see that this makes it really easy to find what's related. And then it allows us to simply grab all of this, and then we can simply cut it. And then, so just to show that it's actually working, if we save over here, you'll see that everything's gonna stop working, which is fine, because that's intentional. And then we just paste it in here, and then great, everything's working again. The other thing is that, so we have some powered classes here, and it looks like we have a description and a title. So let's go ahead and pull that over. So it looks like the title probably should honestly be a utility class. But one thing at a time right now, the one thing that can be really tricky with refactors is getting distracted. And so here, let's see, we have the description as well, so I need to find that. Here we go. Okay, so the description has a few things that go along with it. Okay, so let's just keep this alphabetical for now, so that's a little easier to manage. So now if I save, everything should still look good, and we've, at this point, refactored the HTML and CSS over. But the one thing I want to do, though, here is that I want to make sure that we actually encapsulate the component styles just to the component itself, now that we started breaking it up. And it doesn't really make sense for it to be global. So, I mentioned in a previous video that personally, while scoped is certainly a viable way to do this, I personally prefer modules. And so here we have our module here, and then this means that we'll need to go inside of our HTML and go ahead and update things. So again, for something like screen reader only, this is a global class, so I don't need to keep that contained in here. But here, we're gonna go ahead and bind this to style.description. And then, all right, so now we have to come here and start adding the style. So again, there's two different ways to do this. If we adhere to the CSS way, where we sort of keep the kebab casing when it comes to multi-word, then this is what you're going to be using. You're using the square brackets. If this bothers you, then what you can certainly do is switch it over to not kebab case, but camel case. And then that will be a way to sort of use this basically style of dot notation rather than the array square bracket access. And so while it's really tempting as I'm looking at this to refactor this into some sort of loop, that's going to be additional time I have to spend on figuring out the algorithm. And frankly, we're not doing so many right now that it would be painful to manage manually. So again, our goal with this session is to focus on the app.vue and refactor that. So rather than get distracted by that, we're just going to go ahead and just for now, go ahead and manually do this. And so let's go ahead and use the multi-cursor to go ahead and take care of that. So this is where this will need to be a little bit more manual. Here we go. That's that. And there we go. And then boom. So here we go. And then, so this is where, let's see, we have, what else do we have? We have the power logo. So 1, 2, 3. Great. So if you bind that class, apply the style, square brackets, and here we go. So now we save, things should start to go back to normal. Okay, great, everything looks good now. And so now we've successfully refactored basically our app hero into its own component. So let's go ahead and save what we've done and commit it.
Commit.
Refactor, abstract hero component. Okay, great. Okay, so the next piece we want to do is take a look at what other sort of complex logic we have here. And so it looks like we have this button here that's actually taking up a bit of space in our markup. And so if we're looking at this, we're basically choosing between whether or not to have basically the start game button or whether to do the restart. And so when we think about this, it actually kind of makes sense to just make this a button that's responsible for starting a new game. And so what I'm going to do here to refactor this is let's go ahead and create a component called new game button. Let's be super explicit. That's really what this does, right? Whether it's a new game as a new player or we're starting a new game, either way, it's a new game. So here, if I go ahead and cut all of this, we should see that everything should disappear. So let's go ahead and save, and then boom, everything's gone. That makes sense. So again, let's go ahead and open this up and then paste this in. And then so now what we expect to hear is new game button is what we expect to see. And then let's import it up here. Import new game button from component/new game button. And we register this, save, and everything's broken again. Whoa, what happened? Hold on, let me just refresh. Okay, there we go. So it looks like we're always defaulting to the restart game already, even though it's a new game. That makes sense, because right now there's nothing, but the JavaScript piece of this button is not working. So let's take a look at how we'd fix that. The first thing to do is we need to actually pass some of these properties. So one, we have the new player here, and this is basically a Boolean, right? So we have props, we have new player, which is going to be of type Boolean, and we're going to default it to true. So it's, by default, it's always going to be a new player. And so the way we're going to want to do this then on this side is under new game button, we'll then pass new player and bind that directly to the new player here. So you can already see this is good. So we have the start game button coming through. And so what we need to do now is take a look at what else we need to do. And so we can see now that the big thing here is that when we click, we actually want to start the game. And so if we take a look at where this is coming from, you'll see that it's actually coming from this create game feature that we had refactored at one point. So you see here, we have the create game in here. It's a function that actually pulls in a deck and creates a brand new game. So while at first my initial thought was maybe to pull in the start game function from basically in a separate setup function, I think one of the reasons that won't work is because since we're executing a function here, right here, you'll see that it's actually within the context of basically the deck that we're passing down. So I'm pretty sure if I try to create another instance, the two won't be connected. And while that's something we can certainly explore in another video, we want to keep our eye on the prize right now, which is to keep at the refactor of app.vue. And so since we have start and restart game, which is basically calling a function depending on whether the new player is true or not, I think the easier thing, to be honest, is to just omit the fact that the user wants to start the game. And so what we can do instead is that we can do a setup with the props and the context object, which I shortcut to CTX. And basically we're going to say that start new game is the method we want to do. And then in that case, let's see, we already know, to be honest, I just realized, so I'm thinking originally what I was thinking is that we would pass a payload to the event that basically tells the parent whether or not to start a new game or to restart a game. But the parent actually does have awareness of this. So really all we need to do is just a function that emits that we need to start a new game. That's the whole point of this thing. And that's all we needed to do. We don't need a payload or anything. So if I go ahead and, so let me go ahead and actually, it's going to yell at me if I forget to do this. So let me expose start new game here. And then we can do start new game here. So when it's clicked, and then start new game here. And then that allows us to save. And so let's go ahead and then let's take a look at the start new game here, down here. All right, so at start new game, then we're going to go ahead and just run a start new game function that's going to be defined in here. So since we no longer need the actual start game, restart game here, we can export that, and we're going to be creating this real quick. So here we can see now that we have start game and restart game here. So what we can really do is, just to show the context here, is that we can go const start new game, right? And we don't worry about a payload right now because it's an event. And when they do that, then we're basically going to say if new player is true, then we run start game. Otherwise, we do a restart game. Whoops. All right, so we save that. And so now if I refresh and we see start game, everything shuffles. Great, and looks like everything is working as expected. So this piece now we've refactored. And so the only question now is to think through, is there anything else? And so it looks like we have some styles we need to bring over. So it looks like the button needs to come over. So let's go ahead and copy all these styles over. Wow, there's a lot of button styles. All right, so see, so this is a great example of something really common like .button, which assuredly on an enterprise level app, we are definitely going to have a lot of them. And so it seems pretty harmless right now, but again, let's protect ourselves with our module class. And let's bind that to style.button. And so we should still, let's see, that did not work as expected. Let's see, start. What else is in here? .button hover, icon ghost. Oh, that makes sense. I need to bind the other things too. We have a lot of other classes. That was here, so we need to bind here. Actually, I wonder if I still need, yes, I do need to bind these. Okay. So here, then we have style. So we have style and then button icon here. And I think we need to bind this as well. It's now inside. No, actually icon play should be fine. Nope, apparently not. So yeah, because it's inside of the modules, basically everything is being dynamically bound. So all of this stuff needs to be dynamically bound. Okay, now we should be good. Start game, restart game. Great. All right, so we have our styles modularized, and we have our new game button. Perfect. So let's go ahead and save this. And so we have tick status. Great. All right. So refactor, create abstract start new game button. Oh, I can't spell. Okay. So actually, one thing worth noting though is that as I'm looking at the template here, we actually probably could just simplify it to a single element and then swap out what's inside of the button. But again, right now, let's focus on what we can iterate on. Because right now, like if in the future someone wants to refactor this, it'd be a simple change because everything's already encapsulated in here. Okay, so what else do we got here? Let's take a look at our HTML. All right, so it looks like the simplest win next, I think, because when it comes to refactoring, it can't tell you enough or stress this enough, is that easy wins are a big deal because it allows you to do encapsulated changes without worrying about breaking everything. And given this piece here is fairly big in terms of like a lot of moving pieces because it's basically the entire game, let's do the smaller piece first before we tackle something larger. So here we have our app hero. So naturally we'll have an app footer then. And then let's open this up with a new snippet, drop this in. Now, some of you may be thinking that this is a little bit of overkill. After all, it's just HTML at this point. But you can imagine if in the future you want to sort of dynamically swap this out or you have like additional data properties, then this makes it really easy for people to enhance it without mucking up the entire app.vue, especially when you have multiple routes and those sort of things. So now that we have this, it should be as simple as importing this here. And then if I scroll up to the top, let's just duplicate this one, save ourselves a little bit of typing, and drop this off. So it's app footer, and just be alphabetical, I'm gonna swap this around, and then app footer like this. So now if we save, everything should be registered, and woof, glitch. All right, boom. We have our footer down here, and everything still works as expected. So this is good. Let's go ahead and commit this. Refactor, abstract out footer. Great. All right, so for the final piece of our refactor, it looks like what we're gonna have to tackle last is this, basically the game board, right? So which contains the cards and everything, but this is what this is. So let's go ahead and create that component. So game board .view, great. And then go ahead and open up that component. So I don't need the sidebar anymore. So let's drop that, close these things up. All right, so what we're doing here is we're gonna take all of this. This is basically the entire game board. And we're gonna drop it inside of, the game board here. So now if we save our app.vue, everything should disappear. Card component is not used, that's fine, that makes sense. But let me go ahead and just drop our game board here since we know we're gonna need it. So let's swap this out to game board and swap this out to game board. So now we save, everything's gonna break, and this makes sense. And the reason it makes sense is because right now we have a bunch of stuff in here we haven't actually registered. So for example, we're gonna need to do the card, and that's right here. And then we need to actually register it here. So now we save and refresh, we should get something. Let's see, status card list. Okay, this makes sense. So if we're looking down here, we're looking at all the things that we're v-binding, then you can see that we have this card list here that we're dependent on as well as a status, so it would naturally make sense then that we need the props for this. And then I think, yeah, let's just keep it at this. So card list is gonna be a type of array. And so we're just gonna say required true. And then also for the status, this is just a type of string, which we're also gonna be requiring as true. So if I save this now, save this now and refresh, good, nothing's happening, which makes sense. We need to actually pass them as props now. So card list equals card list, and status equals status save. And boom, all right, so we already see this is looking already pretty good. We have our game board with the different props, but when we're clicking on it though, nothing's happening. And so when we look at the console log, we see that it's because the flip card property is basically not being triggered, which makes sense because flip card doesn't exist here, right? It only exists inside of app.vue over here. So if I look at, go ahead and flip card, we can see here that it's actually going to accept the payload from the card itself, which basically gives like an identification of what kind of card it is. And so even though we're emitting an event from a card here, I think this is still a good example where we can still actually just pass it upwards once more. I think if we had more complex state management as far as passing event data up, I think then we may want to consider a more universal way of tracking, sort of like sharing basically what's happening. But for now, I think the simplest path forward to success is to go ahead and make this part basically a trigger. So what we want to do is we're going to trigger the select card event, which will be a method. And so similarly to what we did in the past, we're going to go ahead and create our setup method with the props and the context. And then we're going to do a const select card. It's going to receive the actual payload, right, that comes with the native event of the card that we already get from card.view. And then it'll be context.emit. And so in this case, when a card is selected, you're basically, no, let's keep it select card. I do want to say that. I think flip card was a little too, because it's not always, are you always flipping when you're clicking on it? All right, let's do a flip card. And the reason I say this is because I try to actually keep the naming of conventions the same, just to make it easier to track sort of like what is supposed to map into things. And so this is what on the game board actually, if you think about it, the event is actually true. You're basically flipping a card in this case. And so, let me go ahead and return select card. Now, you might be thinking like, if that's the case, why not name everything flip card? And that's certainly a valid argument. I think from a more generic programming perspective, it was like, this is what the user is doing as far as selecting the card. But I think the flip card in the game board makes a little bit more sense because now you're sort of talking about the, call it like a contextualized story of what's happening. And so really what's happening is the user is flipping a card within this game context. So that's why I'm going to keep it in this sense. And so now if we go down into here, we'll see that game board. And you'll see that the benefit of this is that by calling it flip card, we can assign it directly to the method flip card. And so now if I go ahead and refresh, you'll see that when I click, it's flipping correctly. So if I go ahead and do this, you'll see 1, 2, and it matches. And so everything is working exactly as expected. So we full screen this a bit. You'll see now that, let's see, it is not prettifying this section for me. Once I have multiple attributes, it's usually nicer for me personally to see. Oh, it really doesn't like it. Okay, I guess prettier is insisting on its way. I guess nothing I can do about it. But you see now that our app.view has this really, it's a really nice entry point now into an app. Like, so someone coming into this app will see there's the hero, there's the footer, we have like the new game button, and we also have this game board. And so with that, we've actually managed to make app.view a lot more friendlier to people when it comes to like coming into the app, rather than sort of navigating a bunch of logic at the HTML level. Now, there's something to be said about going forward, maybe rethinking through some of like what's being exposed here inside of yeah. And so, yeah, what we have here is now a refactored app.view. And so let's go ahead and commit that. So let's boom. All right, our game board is successfully refactored. Refactor extra game board component. Okay. And that's a wrap. As you can see, when it comes to refactoring, it's really easy to be tempted to do additional refactorings that aren't in the original scope of plan. But that's why I say when it comes to refactoring, really do try to focus in on what you're trying to accomplish. And so as we set forth at the beginning of this video, the goal was very simple, is we wanted to make the app.view components into different pieces so that we basically had different entry points into different responsibilities of the app. And so again, there are certainly things we can do as far as exploring maybe other ways we could share features or state, maybe using the composition API, but that is for another episode. So thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.